Thank you so much for joining us on Africa This Morning. My name is Beryl, Ooro. It is the 10th of March 2014. Let's start the bulletin with a look at the top stories. Malaysia Airlines. Plane full of passengers still missing. Oil deposits. Libya issues fiery threat to North Korea over petroleum deposits. And esports, technology giving a chance to global spectators to share the passion of sport. The Boeing aircraft carrying 239 passengers from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing is yet to be found. Malaysian authorities have announced that they were investigating the possibilities that the missing Malaysian Airlines plane had turned back before disappearing.
More than 24 hours after the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, the country's civil aviation chief said its fate was still a mystery.
The rescue and rescue operations continued last night until this morning, and we have to report that we have not able to locate anything, see anything. Therefore, there's nothing new to report.
The Boeing aircraft, carrying 239 passengers and crew, lost contact on Saturday en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It's emerged 2 Europeans named in the passenger manifest had both lost their passports in Thailand, one last year, the other 2 years previously. The identities of 2 other passengers are also being investigated, but there have been no reports of sabotage or claims of an attack. Despite the mystery, there appears little sign it's damaged the confidence of people travelling on other Malaysian Airlines flights. Those checking in at Kuala Lumpur Airport on Sunday were philosophical.
Well, there are lots of mishaps in the world, but life has to go on. It happened yesterday, and today I'm flying off to London. I've already booked the tickets months ahead.
Well, no reason to why not, because it's a good airline. Yeah, it's a one-off. We don't know what's happened yet, whether it's the aircraft or anything else for it to drop out of the sky.
As the search for flight MH370 goes on, relatives of those missing with it were still gathering in Beijing on Sunday to wait for news. Of the total passengers, more than half were Chinese. Despite the absence of wreckage sightings, Malaysian Airlines said on Sunday it feared the worst.
The family members and relatives of the 239 passengers on board the missing Malaysian Airlines plane waited anxiously for news of their loved ones at Beijing, with some angry over what they say was the airline's initial lack of response.
Friends and relatives of passengers aboard the missing Malaysian Airlines plane gather in Beijing. They face a tense wait for news. Malaysia's transport minister was denying Vietnamese media reports of a crash in the South China Sea, insisting the aircraft was still missing.
There are 2 issues that have been raised earlier, that the plane landed in Nanning. That is not true. The second point, that they found wreckage in an island on the south side of Vietnam. DCA and also our foreign office have said that this is not true.
Malaysia Airlines Group Chief confirmed only that contact had been lost.
We are deeply saddened this morning with the news on MH370. Malaysia Airlines confirmed that this flight, MH370, lost contact with Subang Air Traffic Control at 2:40 a.m. this morning.
The missing aircraft had 227 passengers and 12 crew on board for the flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. The passengers included people from 14 nations, the majority of whom were Chinese. The last contact with the plane was about 2 hours into its journey, and Malaysia Airlines says no distress signal was given.
Russian forces block Ukraine's only exit point to the Black Sea by sinking 2 aging vessels as the crisis in Crimea intensifies.
Wind whips across Crimea's biggest lake as Ukraine's warships rise and fall in the choppy waves. Russian forces have blocked Ukraine's only exit point to the Black Sea by sinking 2 aging vessels here. and a well-armed Russian missile cruiser sits a short distance off the coast. A third of Ukraine's warships are left stranded in the waters close to land, with Russian forces blocking them. Ukraine is now facing a humiliating loss of its navy.
We are not going to fight. We hope it will be resolved in a peaceful way. If Crimea goes to Russia, it's all right. We will go to serve in the other locations.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's naval headquarters in Sevastopol, the same port where Russia's Black Sea Fleet is based, remains under virtual siege by Russian soldiers and pro-Russian activists. Crimea's parliament speaker says the region does not trust international observers.
Here in our autonomous republic, we have a severe allergy to all these observers because they definitely sided with the other party. They are accomplices of what has been done to Ukraine.
This comes after warning shots were fired to prevent an unarmed international military observer mission from entering Crimea. Tempers have flared in the last 2 days since the region's pro-Moscow leadership declared it part of Russia and announced a March 16th referendum to confirm it.
Egypt's interim president Adli Mansour on Saturday adopted a presidential election law making the electoral committee's decisions immune to appeals, a measure criticized by some political forces within the Egyptian political realm. Adli Mansour cited the nature of the transitional period as the inspiration for the directive and said it was important to prevent delays for both the presidential and subsequent parliamentary elections.
The presidential election is seen as a major step in a roadmap outlined by interim authorities after the military ousted President Mohamed Morsi in July.
A law is issued to organize the presidential elections, so the first phase of the second round of voting of the roadmap has been accomplished by issuing the law. It opens the door for the Electoral Committee to establish the second phase by announcing the start of the presidential election procedures, opening the door for election running and working on the process till the end by announcing the winner of the elections, to go forward after the last elections by voting for parliament.
With the adoption of the law, the Electoral Committee can now set a date for the election. The law does not allow appeals against the Electoral Committee's decision, a measure that has been condemned by some political forces.
The decision of the committee is final and cannot be appealed by anyhow or by any party. Also, its decisions cannot be cancelled or undone.
The controversial legislation stipulates that candidates should not be younger than 40 years old and that they should collect more than 25,000 endorsements in at least 15 of the country's 27 provinces.
Outlawing appeals of the committee's decision is based on, first, the approval of the cabinet, second, the point of view of the Constitutional Court, third, the nature of the transitional period the country is going through, which requires electing a president and electing the parliament as soon as possible.
Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who has emerged as the country's most popular political figure, has not yet announced his candidacy, but aides say he has decided to stand.
Libya has threatened to bomb a North Korean-flagged tanker if it tries to ship oil from a rebel-controlled port in a major escalation of a standoff over the country's petroleum wealth.
Libya threatened on Saturday to bomb a tanker sailing under a North Korean flag if it tried to ship oil from a port that's now under rebel control. It's a major escalation in a standoff between the government and armed rebels over the country's oil wealth. Rebels have seized 3 major ports in eastern Libya since August. On Saturday, they announced they've started to independently export oil from those ports. Abarabo al-Barasi is the self-declared prime minister of Libya's Eastern Autonomy Movement. At a ceremony to mark the rebels' first shipment, he demanded that 15% of national oil revenues go to their region.
We reaffirm that we do not accept any threats towards any tanker or ship that we are dealing with or are contracted with. We are not making threats and we do not want to use force. However, if anyone attacks us, we will be prepared to defend ourselves.
A successful oil shipment would be a blow to Libya's government. It's struggling to control militias who helped topple Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Many kept their weapons and are now a challenge to the state's authority.
Small groups in Venezuelan opposition sympathizers continue to protest in Caracas after nearly a month to demand the resignation of President Nicolás Maduro.
Isolated incidents of violence continue to erupt in Venezuela. In Caracas, small groups of anti-government protesters clash with riot police.
Here are the people who are fighting for a better future. Because in Venezuela there is no future, and we need real change, and unfortunately this is the only resource we Venezuelans have today to say we have some dignity.
Ongoing protests are demanding the resignation of President Nicolás Maduro. A separate demonstration, dubbed the Protest of the Empty Pots, was making noise against high inflation and food shortages. A line of riot police moved with the demonstrators as they made their way to the food ministry. Protesters shouted and scuffled with police, but these demonstrations remained peaceful in comparison.
South American foreign ministers are to discuss the unrest in Venezuela at a meeting this week after nearly a month of protests and clashes have claimed the lives of more than 20 people.
Venezuela's worst unrest in a decade saw more clashes on the streets of the capital, Caracas, on Friday. The explosion of anti-government demonstrations has claimed at least 20 lives since February. It's scenes like these that have led to a meeting of Latin American foreign ministers next week to discuss the crisis. The meeting is due to take place on Tuesday in Chile at the Union of South American Nations gathering. In a further twist, earlier in the week, Venezuela's president severed diplomatic and commercial ties with Panama. Nicolás Maduro said Panama was conspiring with the United States to intervene in Venezuela's affairs. Panama's president called Maduro's action immature. Its foreign minister called it astonishing.
Quisiéramos señalar y reiterar el asombro.
We want to express and reiterate the astonishment caused to the government of Panama by the decision of the Venezuelan government to break diplomatic relations with Panama, he said. As we've shown, we find this measure lamentable and disproportionate.
Esta medida lamentable, desproporcionada.
Despite the opposition protesters' clamour for Maduro to step down, there's no sign that he'll be forced from office, nor that the unrest is hitting Venezuela's crucial oil exports.
Turkey's former army chief was released from jail after court ruled that his rights were violated during the trial of his alleged role in a coup plot.
Turkey's former army chief İlker Başbuğ left jail in Istanbul a free man on Friday night. He'd served 26 months of a life sentence before a constitutional court ruled his rights had been violated during his trial over alleged involvement in a coup plot.
Bizi bu cezaevinde 26 ay.
The grounds for my release are valid, he says. Also for all the others who are still imprisoned.
Burada tuttu.
Therefore, those who are still imprisoned here will be set free. Evidently, we're sure of that.
Benim 26 ay hürriyetimden yoksun bıraktılar.
Başbuğ's been released after a ruling that the court trying him had failed to produce a detailed verdict. The ruling could set a precedent for more than 200 others jailed over what's become known as the Ergenekon conspiracy.
In the desolate camps of Western Myanmar, many homeless Rohingya are determined to assert their identity after years of violent persecution. In the coming census, that many fear will spark turmoil.
These desolate camps in Rakhine State in Western Myanmar are home to Muslims forced to live here in almost total isolation from their Buddhist neighbours. They're known as the Rohingya, a stateless minority viewed as foreign by Myanmar's government and many of its citizens. They call them Bengali, believing they are immigrants from neighbouring Bangladesh.
There is no such thing as the Rohingya ethnicity in the world. It is just a term. Ethnic Rakhines know their intention. It is a political aim, so Rakhines cannot accept it and are very angry.
This view is common. Currently, Rohingya couples have to get government permission to get married. Most are denied citizenship, despite many being able to trace their ancestry in the country. Later this month, Myanmar will hold its first population census in 30 years. It could finally help the Rohingya by letting them state their identity as they wish. But human rights groups warn the census could actually cause more problems.
The concern right now among the Rohingya population is that the census will be used as a repressive tool to create, in some ways, a paper trail further denying their citizenship.
There are an estimated 800,000 Rohingya in Rakhine. Local Buddhists are worried, fearing Muslims could one day hold more political influence over the state. That fear and resentment has spilled over into violence. More than 200 people were killed in unrest in 2012. Tens of thousands of Rohingya have since fled to other countries. Some see the census as crucial to furthering the Rohingya community's cause. This man was injured as he tried to stop a boat of Muslims from leaving.
He went there to stop them from going abroad. He asked them not to leave, because we have to take part in the census. He lost a mobile and $150 and was cut with knives on his head and hands and beaten with a pipe.
The UN-backed census is likely to throw fresh light on this complex and diverse country. But in Rakhine, the fear remains that it could further fuel the state's combustible divisions.
When talking sports, the players' passion is shared to a heightened degree by the spectators of the game, and that is what makes the game the game. Now technology has given a platform to the spectator from the comfort of his home through the League of Legends computer game. This is part of a growing phenomenon known as e-sport. The game has become a global spectator sport, complete with sponsored teams and large cash prizes.
No, this isn't a rock concert, it's a computer game tournament. League of Legends is the most popular online game in the world, with some 27 million people logging on every day. For top players, tournaments are held every week in cities around the globe. 250 fans have come to this one in Los Angeles, with many times that number watching it online.
I used to play obsessively, like 20 hours, like 30 hours, sometimes like non-stop. And you'd oftentimes forget to sleep, and like eat sometimes.
For this particular e-sport, two 5-player teams compete for around 40 minutes, trying to wipe each other out. Winners can eventually make it to the finals in South Korea, where the prize is a $1 million check. The game's popularity is helped by the fact that it's free to play, and the developer is keen to point out that top players can make big money.
We absolutely have sponsors for the pro players. Pro players have individual sponsors, teams have sponsors, as well as the league. Our pros play in the leagues are salaried by their teams. Some of them can earn into the 6-figure salaries.
Successful players can become stars in their own right, like Mitch Voorspels, a Belgian known online as Crapo.
Yeah.
At 23, he gave up an engineering degree to play League of Legends full-time. He now makes several $1,000s a month.
League's easy to play, more fun than studying, and eventually it led to a choice for me when I actually started winning a lot and I actually got into teams where I had to choose, like, do I go into esports or do I pursue my career in engineering as I was doing at the time?
Esports are already big business. While playing League of Legends itself is free, in-game purchases and tournament tickets are not. Last year, publisher Riot Games made an estimated $600 million.
Africa has been called the cradle of humanity, with archaeologists having unearthed evidence of man's early existence. Now, archaeologists in Peru have discovered a grave containing human remains dating back some 3,000 years. Additional evidence that will guide science experts to better trail the footprints of early man.
They're human remains, but these found in Peru are particularly special. The archaeologists who unearthed them say they date back about 3,000 years. The remains of the two adults, an adolescent and a child, were found with artifacts like tools, ceramic fragments and necklaces. The archaeologists say the find is particularly significant because they're the first human remains from the pre-Incan Marcaval culture.
And on that note, we come to the end of the Bulletin on Africa this morning. Join us shortly as we take a look at the leading stories on social media on our segment, The Trend.